You don't have to thank me, sir. I just didn't want you to die alone." 1 week later, the billionaire handed her the keys to his hotel. But behind that gift was a secret, powerful enough to destroy them both. The clatter of silverware and faint buzz of wealthy chatter filled the Grand Regency Hotel's 5-star restaurant. Under its sparkling chandeliers and polished marble floors, everything gleamed except for Nia. She moved like clockwork, weaving between tables with practiced ease, a tray balanced on her arm and exhaustion stitched into every step. Her black apron bore the faded badge, Nia, server level 1. Guests rarely glanced at it. Even fewer said her name. It was 12:37 a.m., the end of another brutal double shift. She could feel the sweat collecting behind her knees, the dull ache in her ankles that always flared up around this hour. But she pushed through. She always did. She didn't have the luxury of slowing down. Rent was due in 3 days, and her sister's tuition still hadn't cleared. A $50 tip tonight could mean dinner next week. A smile could mean keeping her job. And no matter how tired she was, she couldn't afford mistakes, not here. Not in this world of suits, caviar, and glass walls that saw through people like her. Then she saw him, slumped in a velvet corner booth like he'd melted into it. Alone. UNMOVING. Nia hesitated. The rest of the dining room had cleared out. Only a few guests lingered over drinks. Most staff were prepping for close. Yet this man, dressed in a rumpled designer blazer and loafers that looked like they cost more than her car, hadn't moved in over 30 minutes. His head drooped low. A half-empty bottle of Glenfiddich sat in front of him. She approached carefully. "Sir?" she said gently. No response. She leaned in, just enough to see the way his chest rose and fell unevenly. His face was flushed. His eyes were glazed. His lips were parted, like he was trying to speak but couldn't find the words. A manager would have called security by now. Staff would have whispered, judged, laughed quietly. But Nia didn't move away. She knew this look. She'd seen it in her uncle's eyes after he lost his job and drowned himself in cheap whiskey. She knew the weight of pain when it hid behind silence. "Sir?" she said again, kneeling slightly. "Can you hear me?" This time his head turned slightly. One eye opened, cloudy and unfocused. He grunted. "You need help getting to your room," she said gently. "Can you stand?" He mumbled something incoherent and tried to push off the table. He staggered, but Nia reached out instinctively, wrapping her arm around his. "I got you," she whispered. "Don't worry." The bartender raised an eyebrow from across the room, but said nothing. Guiding the man up wasn't easy. He was heavy, and the alcohol made him stumble every few steps, but he didn't resist. As they reached the elevator, he finally muttered a full sentence. "Top floor, penthouse." Nia's eyes widened. There was only one penthouse in the building. As the elevator doors slid shut, she looked at him properly for the first time. Despite the disheveled hair and flushed cheeks, he was handsome, sharp jawline, graying at the temples, a small scar above his brow. There was something vaguely familiar about him. When the doors opened to the top floor, it hit her. Elliot Vance, CEO of Vance International, billionaire hotel mogul, owner of the Grand Regency Hotel. Nia froze. Her heart pounded. The man she was holding up by the waist could fire her with a snap of his fingers, or make her life unrecognizable with a single decision. Still, she guided him through the private hallway and helped him unlock the penthouse suite. The room opened like a palace, floor-to-ceiling windows, marble floors, fresh orchids in crystal vases. But Elliot barely made it 2 steps before collapsing on the plush sofa. She helped him remove his jacket, then draped a nearby blanket over him. He didn't say much, just a quiet, "Thanks," barely audible. Nia stood there for a second, uncertain. Then she whispered, "You don't have to thank me, sir. I just didn't want you to die alone." As she turned to leave, she didn't see the small red light blinking in the corner of the suite, a hidden security camera, capturing every moment. She took the elevator back down and walked through the empty lobby, half expecting someone to stop her. No one did. Back in the staff room, she didn't tell anyone what had happened. She just gathered her things, changed into her street shoes, and slipped out into the cool night. The city was quiet. The moon hung heavy in the sky, and as Nia walked the 7 blocks to her bus stop, She felt something strange settling in her chest. Not fear, not pride, but something more fragile. Hope that she had no idea that this simple act of kindness had just opened a door, not just to the penthouse, but to everything that lay beyond it. At first, he didn't move. Nia wasn't sure if he even heard her. Then slowly, like a man waking from a long nightmare, he rose from his seat. He staggered slightly. She steadied him with one arm, careful not to make a scene. Guests were watching. Staff were whispering. "You're not supposed to touch the guests," the hostess hissed under her breath as Nia passed by. Nia ignored her. In the elevator, the man leaned against the mirrored wall, eyes closed. "I'm Elliot," he said softly, voice hoarse. "Elliot Vance." Nia's breath caught in her throat. Elliot Vance, CEO of Vance International, billionaire hotel magnate. Technically, her boss's 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 boss. She'd seen his photo on the hallway wall 100 times. But that man looked powerful, untouchable. The man in this elevator looked like he had no one left to call. She cleared her throat. "I'm Nia." He opened one eye. "You don't work for me, do you?" "I work in the restaurant downstairs." "Technically, yes." He smirked weakly. "Well, remind me to give you a raise." She smiled, more out of awkwardness than anything. "I'll believe it when I see it." When they reached the top floor, she helped him to the door of the penthouse suite. His security guards stood at the end of the hallway, watching with unreadable expressions. One of them stepped forward. "We've got it from here, miss." "But—" Elliot shook his head. "She can come in." They exchanged glances but said nothing. Nia hesitated, but followed him inside. The suite was enormous, more elegant than anything she'd ever seen. Gold accents, a grand piano, a view of the city that made her forget the floor beneath her feet. Elliot slumped onto the couch, rubbing his temples. "Can I get you anything?" she asked. He looked up. "Why did you help me?" Nia blinked. "Because no one else did." His eyes lingered on her, searching. Then he nodded slowly. "Most people only come near me when they want something. I don't want anything," she said honestly. "You will," he said quietly. Silence hung between them. Then Nia turned to leave, pausing at the door. She looked back over her shoulder, her voice soft but steady. "You don't have to thank me, sir. I just didn't want you to die alone." And with that, she walked out, unaware that the hidden security camera in the corner of the room had recorded every word. Unaware that Elliot would watch it again the next morning. And unaware that her life was already beginning to change. The elevator hummed softly as it rose toward the penthouse, the silence inside interrupted only by the man's unsteady breathing. Nia stood beside him, holding his arm to keep him upright. His weight leaned heavily into her shoulder, but she didn't complain. Most waitresses would have ignored him. In fact, her manager told her to. "That's above your pay grade," he'd sneered when she asked if someone should help the man in the booth who'd barely touched his food and spilled half his wine. But Nia couldn't leave him there, slumped and humiliated. Something about him felt hollow. Like the alcohol wasn't the cause, it was the escape. "Room 4301, the man slurred. "Don't leave yet. What's your name?" "Nia," she said gently. "Come on, we're almost there." He blinked hard, squinting at her like she was the only thing in focus. "You're kind. That's rare in a place like this." When the elevator doors opened, Nia walked him slowly down the plush carpeted hallway to the penthouse door. She reached into his jacket and pulled out his keycard. Room service staff weren't supposed to do that, but she doubted he'd remember where he put it. The card unlocked with a beep, and the door opened to reveal a room that looked more like a private palace than a hotel suite. Glass walls, dark wood, gold accents, a grand piano untouched by dust. She helped him onto the bed. As he sat down, he looked up at her and said with surprising clarity, "They only care about what I own, not who I am." Nia hesitated, then crouched to meet his eyes. "Maybe you should stop showing them what you have and show them who you are." For a long moment, he just stared at her. His expression shifted, confusion first, then something else. Something fragile. A part of him was sobering up, just by hearing a voice that didn't want anything from him. Nia stood and pulled a blanket over him. "Sleep it off," she said softly. "You'll be okay." Then she turned to leave. She didn't know that. Hidden security camera above the minibar had recorded every second. She didn't know that in the adjacent room, a private bodyguard had watched her carry his boss up 30 floors and lay him down with the tenderness of someone caring for family. She didn't know that the man she helped was Elliot Vance, billionaire hotel magnate and the CEO of the very chain she was working in. She thought she was just doing the right thing, but in less than a week, that one choice would flip her entire world upside down, and not everyone would be happy about it. The next morning, Nia walked into work with her stomach in knots. She hadn't slept much. Her thoughts had been spinning all night, not just about what she did, but what it might cost her. Helping a drunk guest to his room had broken hotel protocol, especially someone as high profile as Elliot Vance. She kept replaying it in her head. Had she said too much? Did she linger too long? Had someone seen? As soon as she reached the back hallway, her name echoed through the intercom. Nia Brooks, please report to Human Resources. Her heart dropped. She walked past the industrial kitchen, avoiding the curious glances of other staff members. Line cook gave her a thumbs up, clearly thinking she'd been called in for something good. But Nia knew better. No one got called to HR for a pat on the back. She entered the beige hallway that led to HR, her palms clammy. The receptionist didn't meet her eyes. Nia Brooks? Yes. You can go in. Mr. Vance is waiting for you. Nia froze. Mr. Vance? The billionaire? She pushed the door open slowly, expecting a cold confrontation. Instead, Elliot Vance was sitting casually at the round conference table, freshly shaved, wearing a crisp navy suit, a far cry from the broken man she'd helped just days ago. His piercing blue eyes lifted when she walked in, and to her surprise, they softened. Miss Brooks, he said, standing. Please, sit. She remained frozen. I didn't mean to overstep, sir, she said quickly. I know I shouldn't have gone up to the penthouse, I just... Elliot raised his hand gently, cutting her off. You saved my life. Nia blinked. What? I mean it. That night, I was at my lowest. You didn't just help me into a room. You sat with me. You listened. You didn't pretend not to see me like everyone else. He paused, glancing out the window. You treated me like a human being. Nia said nothing, unsure where this was going. I've been surrounded by people who fear me, want something from me, or pretend to respect me. But no one's looked me in the eye the way you did in that elevator. He smiled faintly. And no one's told me to drink water and shut up before. She let out a nervous laugh despite herself. I wanted to meet the woman who reminded me what kindness looks like. Elliot continued. And I was hoping ... You'd join me for lunch. Just to talk. Nia's breath caught. Lunch with the CEO? She glanced around, half expecting someone to jump out and say it was a joke, but it wasn't. Elliot Vance was genuinely inviting her. Not as a staff member, not as a servant. As a person, she nodded slowly. I'd be honored. And as she walked out of that room, the eyes of the receptionist and half the hallway followed her. But Nia didn't look back, because something had just shifted. And for the first time in a long time, she could feel it. Her story was changing. Nia had never sat at the dining area as a guest before. She stood stiffly at the edge of the private booth, still dressed in her modest work clothes, unsure whether this was a mistake or some sort of cruel joke. Her heart pounded as Elliot Vance, now sober and dressed sharply in a tailored suit, stood to greet her. Sit, he said gently, pulling out the chair himself. Please. She sat slowly, her back straight, eyes cautious. The room buzzed with judgmental whispers from the waitstaff and upper-class guest people she had served just days ago. She kept her gaze fixed on the menu, though her hands trembled slightly. Elliot, however, seemed unfazed. He ordered for both of them, salmon with garlic butter and lemon rice, plus iced tea for her and water for himself. I owe you more then. Lunch, he said after the waiter left. But I wanted to start here. Nia looked at him, confused. You don't owe me anything, sir. I was just doing the decent thing. That's exactly why I want to talk to you. He leaned in, voice lowered. That night I was spiraling. I didn't think anyone would notice if I disappeared. Not one person. And then, you. You helped me without knowing who I was. No cameras, no recognition. Just kindness. Nia looked down, trying to steady herself. You looked like you needed help, that's all. He watched her, something unreadable in his expression. What's your story, Nia? She hesitated, then sighed. Nothing special. I wait tables, I live in a tiny apartment. I take care of my little brother when my shift ends. I save what I can. One day, maybe I'll open a diner, not fancy, just mine. Elliot nodded slowly, as if absorbing every word. And yet, with everything you have going on, you still stop to help a stranger. She gave a soft smile. I know what it's like to feel invisible. A long silence fell between them, heavy with meaning. Then, Elliot smiled, a real one. This time, not the public mask he wore. You're not invisible to me, Nia. Just then, the food arrived, and for a few strange, quiet minutes, they ate like old friends. Nia couldn't help but notice the difference in his tone. His posture. This man wasn't just a billionaire with a name on a building. He was lonely, grateful, and possibly planning something she couldn't yet imagine. As they finished, he slid a small envelope across the table. What's this? She asked. He simply said, a thank you. But just the beginning. She opened it. Inside was a gold embossed pass with her name engraved. Access. Executive Lounge. Unlimited. Indefinite. Her hands shook again. But this time for a very different reason. Something big was happening. She just didn't know how big yet. Nia adjusted her apron and tied her braids back as she stepped through the glass doors of the Grand Lexington Hotel. It had been a week since that bizarre night, the night she'd walked a drunken billionaire to his suite, tucked him in like a child, and left without expecting anything in return. She hadn't seen or heard from Mr. Elliot Vance since. Not that she expected to. Billionaires didn't chase waitresses down to say thank you. And besides, she had bills to pay and a double shift to get through. As she headed to the staff lounge to grab her locker key, she noticed something strange. Her name tag was gone. Her locker emptied. Her uniform missing. Her heart thudded in her chest. Was this it? Was she being let go? Before panic could fully bloom, two suited men approached. Miss Nia Brooks? One asked politely. She stiffened. Yes? You've been requested upstairs. Mr. Vance would like a word. He asked us to escort you personally. Nia blinked. Mr. Vance? The CEO? The men nodded. She hesitated, wary, confused, but followed them into the elevator. As they ascended, her mind raced. Was she in trouble? Was this some form of delayed punishment for breaking hotel policy by helping him to his room? The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Instead of leading her to the penthouse, they turned toward the executive lounge, an opulent space she'd only cleaned, never entered. The doors swung open. Elliot Vance stood by the window, dressed sharply in a tailored navy suit. He turned slowly when she entered, his face sober but kind. Miss Brooks, he said, gesturing toward the chair across from him. Please sit. She sat stiffly, her hands in her lap. I've had a lot of people take care of me in my life, he began, voice low. But that night, you didn't treat me like a charity case or a billionaire. You treated me like a man, a broken one. And you didn't ask for anything. Nia said nothing. She wasn't sure what to say. I've built an empire, Elliot continued. But in that moment, drunk and pathetic, you reminded me of something I lost a long time ago, dignity. He opened a sleek leather folder and slid it across the table. What's this? She asked. Transfer of ownership, he said calmly. As of today, the Grand Lexington is yours. Silence fell. Nia stared at him, then at the papers, then back at him. I don't understand. I've spent years surrounded by people who wanted my money, he said. You gave me something without asking. Now I want to give you something no one can take away. Tears welled up in her eyes as her trembling fingers touched the contract. No strings? He smiled gently. Only one. Run it like you've always dreamed of. Outside that room, the world kept moving. But inside, a waitress became a woman. With power. And an empire began to change. The headline read, Waitress to hotel owner in 7 days. The woman who stunned the billionaire world. But inside the luxury hotel Nia now owned, the applause died quickly. On her first official day as owner, Nia walked through the lobby in a tailored blazer, head high. Her nameplate on the executive door gleamed with fresh engraving, Nia Whitaker. Owner. Guests smiled, staff whispered. Some applauded politely, but others simply stared. Behind those thin smiles was a storm brewing. Marcus Denley, the general manager of 15 years, didn't bother to hide his sneer. "Miss Whitaker," he said, emphasizing the miss like it was an insult. "Let me know when you're ready for a crash course on how real management works." He didn't wait for a reply before walking off. In the break room, 3 senior managers huddled, whispering over coffee. "She probably signed some NDA with that billionaire. Or maybe it's a charity stunt," one muttered. "Give it a month. She run this place into the ground," another scoffed. But Nia saw it all. The sideways glances, the snide remarks, the deliberate delays in following her directives. She'd fought hard her entire life. This wasn't new. Still, the hurt cut deeper now. She hadn't expected a red carpet, but she hadn't expected war either. In a staff meeting, she introduced initiatives: better wages for housekeeping, scholarships for employees' kids, mentorship programs. She barely got through the agenda before a finance exec interrupted, smirking. "Great ideas. If we were running a charity, not a business." That night, she sat alone in the same cafe booth where she'd once taken 5-minute breaks to cry in private. Only now she was the owner, and still crying. She stared at her phone, ready to call. Elliot, the billionaire who'd changed her life. But something stopped her. She didn't want to run back to the man who gave her the keys. She was going to earn them. The next morning, she arrived before anyone else and reviewed every department report, expense file, and complaint log from the past year. What she found was staggering: underpaid staff, forged invoices, favoritism, even vendor kickbacks, and the names tied to it. All the people trying to break her down. Nia didn't get angry. She got ready. They thought she was just a waitress playing boss, but they were about to learn. She'd spent years watching from the sidelines. Now, she was playing to win. Nia stood before the full-length mirror in her modest apartment, adjusting the rim of her cap and tucking her braids under a wig. She wore a basic housekeeping uniform she'd borrowed from a friend who still worked in the service wing. It was creased and faded, just enough to blend in without drawing attention. She had been the owner of the hotel for 6 days, and in those 6 days she'd heard enough whispers, caught enough glares, and received enough politely veiled resistance to know something was wrong, very wrong. "Time to see it with my own eyes," she whispered. She entered the hotel from the back, through the same service door she used to clock in through. No one paid her much attention. The front-of-house staff was too focused on appeasing high-end guests. Nia moved through the hallways with a mop bucket in hand, not to clean, but to watch. She started with the break room. 2 senior staffers stood by the vending machine, laughing. "I don't care who owns the place," one said with a sneer. "A waitress is still a waitress. Let her play CEO while it lasts." Nia didn't flinch. She rolled past, unrecognized. On the 9th floor, she heard a guest complaining at the front desk about being double charged. The receptionist smiled sweetly but whispered under her breath as the guest walked away, "Should have stayed at the Hilton, cheapskate." By the time Nia reached the kitchens, she felt ill. A line cook stood silently as a manager berated him for the 3rd time. Nia had counted over an error the manager himself had caused. A dishwasher limped in with swollen feet, asking to switch shifts with someone because she had no bus fare to get home early. She was dismissed with a scoff. It wasn't just unprofessional. It was abusive. But the final straw came when Nia entered the linen room. A young cleaning girl, barely older than 18, was crying quietly in the corner. Nia crouched down and asked gently, "Are you okay?" The girl hesitated, then looked up and said, "I'm not allowed to talk to guests." "I'm not a guest," Nia replied softly. "I'm just someone who sees what others pretend not to." The girl stared at her a moment longer. Then she spoke. "Sometimes they take our tips off the books. Say it's for house deductions. We can't complain. If we do, we get the worst shifts or sent home early with no pay." Nia clenched her jaw. Every thread of her being wanted to scream. But she simply nodded and stood. Her disguise had done its job. By the end of that night, she had a full report, mental notes, recorded audio on her phone, and names. So many names. The next morning, the board would meet. But this time, Nia wouldn't be walking in as the maid. She'd be walking in as the owner, with fire in her eyes. The tension in the air was thick enough to slice with a knife. Nia stood outside the glass-paneled boardroom, her heart pounding beneath her blazer. The hotel staff who once called her just a waitress now glanced her way with equal parts awe and doubt. Inside, the board members of Vance International waited, some with forced smiles, others with crossed arms and eyes full of contempt. She adjusted the cuffs of her borrowed suit, took a deep breath, and stepped in. The room fell silent. At the head of the table sat Martin Graves, interim CEO and longtime confidant of the Vance family. Beside him, a smirking finance director tapped a stack of papers. "Miss Jordan," Martin said, deliberately omitting the title of owner, "we're here to discuss the unusual circumstances surrounding your ownership. Some of us believe your role should be reevaluated. That was the polite way of saying stripped. Nia didn't flinch. She opened the leather folder she carried and calmly placed several documents on the table. "Before we start," she said, her voice steady but cutting, "I'd like to share some facts." She handed out printed emails, audio transcripts, signed testimonies, all gathered in the last 7 days. What began as whispers and sabotage had turned into something far uglier: deliberate misreporting of funds, discriminatory hiring practices, and an internal plan to oust her the moment Elliot was out of the picture. One recording, captured by a sympathetic employee, was damning. "We can't let a maid run the place," a manager's voice hissed. "She got lucky. Let her mop floors, not manage millions." Murmurs erupted across the room. Nia didn't blink. "Lucky?" she said softly. "I worked 12-hour shifts to survive. I listened, I learned, and I treated people with decency, even when no one gave me the same in return. That's not luck. That's leadership." Martin's face had gone pale. The smirk on the finance director's lips faded. Then came the final blow. Nia reached into her folder again, this time placing a signed document on the table with Elliot Vance's bold signature. "This," she said, "is a legally binding declaration from Mr. Vance himself, confirming that I am the rightful owner of this property, handpicked, trusted, and fully vested." Silence. And then one by one, board members lowered their eyes. One even nodded slightly in respect. The vote was taken, unanimous. "She stays." Nia exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. As she walked out of the boardroom, the hallway was quiet, but something had changed. Not just in her status, but in how they looked at her. No longer the waitress, no longer the joke. Now, she was the woman who fought back and won. A year later, the plaque in the hotel lobby no longer read Vance International. It read, "The Jordan Grand," named not after wealth, but after the woman who rose from behind the serving tray to stand at the helm. The grand chandelier sparkled above a crowd of guests, press, and staff as Nia Jordan took the stage in a tailored white suit. Her natural curls crowned her head with pride. She smiled, steady and unshaken, as flashbulbs lit the room. "To everyone who once said I didn't belong," she began, eyes locking on a few familiar faces in the audience, "thank you." A small ripple of laughter followed, but her tone was sincere. "You pushed me hard enough that I had no choice but to stand taller." The hotel had changed more than its name. In the months since she won the boardroom battle, Nia had dismantled the toxic culture from the inside out. Gone were the managers who whispered insults behind her back. In their place stood a diverse, respectful leadership team, many of whom had once been overlooked, just like her. Housekeepers now had a lounge as elegant as the executives. Pay scales were equalized. Career development programs bloomed in every department. And on the top floor, where Elliot Vance once drank himself into silence, now sat a community outreach office funding scholarships for hospitality students from underprivileged backgrounds. It wasn't just a hotel anymore. It was a symbol. Back in the crowd, Elliot Vance stood quietly near the exit. No bodyguards, no champagne. Just a man in a simple suit, watching the woman who once saved him from his own ruin. She caught his eye and smiled. He nodded, proud, humbled, and deeply changed. After the ceremony, a young bellboy approached Nia with trembling hands. "Miss Jordan," he said shyly, I wanted to say thank you. My mom was a cleaner here. She cried when you gave her benefits. I want to be like you someday. Nia knelt slightly to meet his eyes. Then never let anyone tell you who you are, she said gently. Let your work speak louder than their opinions. That night, she sat alone in the penthouse, not with wine or worry, but with peace. Looking out over the city skyline, she reflected on the journey. The humiliation. The fear. The disbelief in people's eyes when she said she was the owner. But now, there were no more questions. She had taken a moment of compassion, a quiet decision to help a broken man, and turned it into a revolution. And though headlines called her the waitress who became a hotel queen, Nia knew the truth. She didn't become powerful. She simply stopped letting others pretend she wasn't.